Μόνος σου πας γρήγορα. Μαζί πάμε πιο μακριά. Αυτό ισχύει για όλες τις κοινότητες, σε οποιοδήποτε χώρο. Και πόσο μάλλον σε έναν χώρο όπως είναι τα κρυπτονομίσματα, που παρόλο που βρισκόμαστε στο 2025, ακόμα είναι πολύ δύσκολο να βρεις ανθρώπους ομοειδεάτες, ανθρώπους με τους οποίους μπορείς να μοιραστείς τις σκέψεις σου και τα ενδιαφέροντά σου στην καθημερινότητά σου. Οπότε αυτό που μπορείς να κάνεις και θα έπρεπε να κάνεις είναι να οργανωθείς, να βρεις άλλους ανθρώπους που έχουν κοινά ενδιαφέροντα, να φτιάξουμε κοινότητες και να ανταλλάσσουμε εκεί τις απόψεις μας. Καθώς είναι και για μένα καθοριστική σημασίας οι πρώτες σου επαφές που θα κάνεις σε αυτόν τον χώρο. Σίγουρα λέμε όλοι κάνε τη δική σου έρευνα, ψάξ' το μόνος σου, ναι, φυσικά, αλλά δεν γίνεται να τα κάνεις όλα μόνος σου και οι άνθρωποι οι οποίοι θα γνωρίσεις στην αρχή θα επηρεάσουν όλη σου την πορεία σε αυτόν τον υπέροχο κόσμο των κρυπτονομισμάτων. Οπότε, θέλω να σας καλωσορίσω σε ένα πολύ όμορφο event. Είχαμε να κάνουμε από πριν το COVID με την Greek CryptoCapitalist Community ένα event φυσικής παρουσίας με κάποιο project. Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι που αυτό το event γίνεται με το SUI. Τους ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που αποδεχτήκανε την πρόσκληση και μας φιλοξενούν και στο χώρο τους. Έχουν φτιάξει εδώ πέρα ένα καταπληκτικό χώρο και με την μικρή έτσι, εμπειρία μου που μίλησα λίγο χθες και με τον Κώστα το Χαλκιά που είναι ένας από τους founder, η φιλοσοφία είναι αυτή. Ο κάτω χώρος είναι co-working space, δηλαδή μπορεί να έρθει οποιοδήποτε, από οποιοδήποτε project να έρθει να δουλέψει. Άρα και αυτό είναι ένα hub για να έρθουν οι κοινότητες πιο κοντά. Και εδώ εμείς σαν Greek CryptoCapitalist Community, όσοι δεν το ξέρετε, είμαστε μια από τις παλιότερες κοινότητες στο Telegram, αλλά δεν έχει σημασία μόνο αυτή η κοινότητα. Εμείς το οργανώνουμε, αλλά είναι και άλλες κοινότητες εδώ. Είναι τα παιδιά από τις Beta, είναι ο Μανώλης, είναι ο Βασίλης. Δηλαδή, όλοι είμαστε κάτω από μια μεγαλύτερη κοινότητα που λέγεται Ελλάδα. Λοιπόν, σήμερα είμαστε πάρα πολύ χαρούμενοι. Οι ομιλίες θα είναι εξαιρετικές. Έχουμε μαζί μας τον Γιώργο τον Δανέζη, που είναι ο δεύτερος Έλληνας co-founder της Mr. Lamps και του SUI. Δυστυχώς δεν μπορούσε να είναι εδώ μαζί μας, θα τον έχουμε σε call να μας πει κάποια πράγματα και στη συνέχεια εξαιρετικοί άνθρωποι από το team, ο Γιάννης Αλβανόπουλος, Γιάννης Αθανασίου και ο Θάνος Μπούργος θα μας μιλήσουν εδώ πέρα και για το τι γίνεται στο οικοσύστημα κατά βάση. Λοιπόν, ένα πολύ μεγάλο χειροκρότημα για τον Γιώργο τον Δανέζη. Παρακαλώ, χαμηλώστε τα κινητά σας και μετά με το τέλος του παρουσιάσης θα έχουμε πάρα πολύ χρόνο να γνωριστούμε, να τα πούμε και να κάνουμε ένα ωραίο get to know each other στο rooftop ή κάτω.
Καλημέρα σας, με ακούτε?
Ναι, σας ακούμε, Γιώργο.
Πάρα πολύ καλά. Λοιπόν, πρώτα απ' όλα σας χαιρετώ όλα τα μέλη της ελληνικής κοινότητας που ήρθαν σήμερα. Είμαι όντως δυστυχώς στο Λονδίνο και δεν μπορούσα να έρθω σήμερα. Θα αλλάξω τη γλώσσα στα αγγλικά για να είμαι σίγουρος ότι όλα τα μέλη της κοινότητας του SUI μπορούν να μας καταλάβουν. So let me repeat again my welcome to all the members of the Greek community and also the international community that are with us today in Athens. It is a real pleasure to welcome everyone to the SuiHub and to actually start having these kind of events that bring everybody who's interested in the cryptocurrency community together. Now, let me say a few words about myself and a little bit about Mr. Labs. So I am by trade an academic. I am a professor at the University of London at UCL in the topic of distributed systems and security. And I have worked in the broader field of peer-to-peer systems, as we used to call it, for more than 25 years now. And this is really the start of my interest in this whole cryptocurrency and also blockchain movement, right? Back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s, we tried to build systems that did not have central parties in the middle of them, right? Because we didn't like the central parties. We could see the old world, as we were considering the pre-internet world, being full of these central parties that eventually start centralizing information, centralizing power, and then exercising this power against everybody who has to use them at that point, right? So we didn't like that in the 90s. And we did try to build peer-to-peer systems. And, you know, these systems were for the things that were interesting at the time, a bit of file sharing, a bit of social networking that didn't have the central parties in the middle. But these early attempts at the time usually failed, both because of a lack of coordination of multiple small parties without any point of centralization, if you want, but also a failure of economics, right? If you want many different people to work with each other, to offer services to each other, etc., the economics of this has to work, right? So central parties had an economic model that was kind of sorted, right? I mean, if you go to a big cloud provider, if you go to a big kind of information aggregator, you pay them, they give you a service, they're in a position of power with you, but, you know, the economics works. Then with social networking sites like the Facebooks of this world and the YouTubes of this world, again, the economics worked through an advertising model. You go, you pay your attention in the sites, you publish your content in the sites for free, right? That's what you think. But then advertisers on the side kind of like get a feed of information, can target advertising, the economics works. So the reason why these kind of peer-to-peer systems that we were trying to build in the early 2000s and late 90s didn't really work out is because the economic model was just not there, right? Like we didn't have a way for different parties to work with each other and you know, make sure that everybody is compensated for the work they do for each other. Now, Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency movement changed all that, right? And this is really the starting point of my interest in this kind of movement to some extent, right? Suddenly, there was a way to bring up computer services, to do the kind of things that you would do in centralized ways, to do from payments, social networking, content distribution, you know, all of these things in a peer-to-peer way without central parties. And these parties had ways of actually exchanging value with each other, right? So this captured my imagination, and then I started, you know, getting interested in building systems like this that operate at scale and can really replace some of the biggest infrastructures that we have out there that are centralized. The very large banking system we have, the very large commerce systems we have, the very large social networking systems we have. But of course, as we all know, the early blockchains, you know, they had limitations. Like the vision was there, but the actual systems were not quite ready to replace these huge kind of planetary scale infrastructures we have that are centralized. And this is why my first interest was always, how do we scale up blockchains? How do we make sure that if we like using a blockchain for all the nice properties it has, right? The fact that it allows us to program money, the fact that it allows us to have this neutral space where we can all interact with each other. No one can be excluded. No one can be given preferential or other access, right? If we want to scale that up to support, you know, transactions for the whole of humanity, how do we do that? And it is really this problem that we started with at Miston Labs three or so years ago, a bit more than that now, when we started designing the SUI blockchain, right? We're like, how can we have effectively an accounting layer that the whole of humanity could use in order to coordinate activity? This activity would be economic activity or any other kind of activity, right? And that led Miston Labs, myself, my co-founders, a whole organization to initiate SUI. And now SUI, of course, is a blockchain that some of you have heard of, and you will hear a bit more probably today, that has the capacity, and of course, initially has found product market fit indeed in doing decentralized finance out there, right? But, you know, finance and money is one thing, and it is of course the primary thing that happens on a decentralized accounting book like SUI, right? And this is why Miston Labs after SUI was involved in launching DeepBook, which is a central order book. But then after a while, we're like, okay, you know, if you have a financial system, if you have ways of making payments, if you have ways of making loans, if you have ways of making expressing futures and perpetuals and all of that. The meaning of that is because you want to actually fuel a real economy, right? I mean, you actually want at some point that financial capability you have to make a difference in the real world and be able to drive real world production effectively and infrastructures, right? So we got quite interested in, can we use these decentralized accounting layers to start replacing, initially technical functions, right, that we see being centralized in the world, right? And our first kind of like foray into that was in building the SUI name system. So this is a name system where it attaches names to addresses or any other identifier on the SUI network. This sounds like a very niche application, but of course it is very central to computer systems to be able to name things in a way that everybody knows that a particular name is a particular address and you can change that, etc. But the most ambitious foray into being able to leverage the decentralized accounting system that SUI represents into building an infrastructure is actually our decentralized storage network called Walrus, which we helped launch a bit more than a month ago now. And what Walrus is a way for folks who need to store data and publish it effectively, and then make sure that it stays there and it is available and no one can censor it and no one can change it without any authorization, etc. To do so without relying on centralized parties like the Google clouds and the Amazon clouds, etc., that at a whim can change the rules and kick you out or block your access to your application or block access to your data, etc., right? And what makes Walrus in its inception and its realization quite interesting is that under the hood, it uses SUI for all of its accounting. So if you need to pay to get some storage and then signal that you want to store particular resources for how long, and all of these kind of like if you want accounting functions, they actually happen on SUI. So Walrus is strategically very important for our community because it really proves that you can build a large scale industrial infrastructure, because storage of information starts becoming an industrial infrastructure, and the underpinning economics of it would be on a high-speed, low-latency blockchain like SUI. And it is a big infrastructure already, even though it's only less than 2 months old. It stores about 600 terabytes. I tried to work out how many DVDs that is. It's more than 1,000 DVDs worth of data, just to give people a sense for how much data that is. So it already performs the function that we would like it to perform. All of that underpinned on economics that are using a blockchain to work, right? Now, let me say a couple of words of, where is our vision taking us next, right? And I'll conclude with that. So we have, of course, spoken to everybody who's enthused about blockchains. And there are many people, I suspect, like the people in this room today and the people who are close to us, who are so enthused about blockchains that they're already doing a lot of activities on chain. Some people are trading coins, some people are holding Bitcoin and other coins. Some people are engaging with, particular games you can play on blockchains or particular infrastructures that use blockchains. And all of this is very good, right? It's very positive. But we also encountered a lot of people who were enthused about blockchains, right? And all the applications that they can have. And they all said, well, this is all great, but at the end of the day, everything that I do on a blockchain is public, right? Everybody can read it. Everybody can see everything I do. And furthermore, in the case of Walrus, our storage system, really it's a publishing system. Like every piece of information that I put on it is word readable. Everybody can read it. And that's okay if I want to publish a book or an article or something like that. It doesn't really work if I want to, for example, back up my own information or share particular files with small groups of people and not the whole world. Or even if I want to do content-based commerce. I want to publish an article and only the people who have a subscription to it are able to read it. That's a very nice application of a blockchain and a storage system, which without some form of privacy or confidentiality, we just cannot realize, right? So it starts becoming the case that the business case for blockchain is becoming mainstream, And again, the technical limitations to some extent of blockchains, namely the fact that now everything is public effectively, all the transactions are public, most of the data is public, right? Is becoming a barrier to expanding, to realizing the enthusiasm into further adoption, okay? So we are, to some extent, focusing a number of projects to address exactly that challenge. The first project we are looking at, which was announced a couple of weeks ago at our annual event Basecamp, is called Seal. It will allow you to effectively manage encryption and decryption keys through the blockchain. So you can basically say, look, I would like to encrypt some data. Here is some encrypted data. And then subject to rules that are on the blockchain, you would be able to access the decryption keys to be able to read conditionally now the data. Some people will be able to read them, some not. Who, for example, if you pay a subscription, you'll be able to decrypt. If the blockchain says you're my friend, you might be able to decrypt, etc. So it allows you to express privacy and confidentiality through blockchain interactions, which is suddenly expanding the scope of what we can use blockchain applications for. A second project, again, that is going to try to allow for more private interactions is called Nautilus, and we're working on that. Instead of using cryptography, encryption and decryption, Nautilus instead is using what is known as trusted execution environments, namely special chips in computers that keep things secret that are happening and computed in them and don't let you basically, even don't let the operator read what is going on, to be able to do some transactions in this trusted execution environment and then certify them back on the SUI blockchain. Again, this gives another tool to decentralized application developers to keep most of the transaction processing on a public blockchain, but some of it that requires some confidentiality or some privacy to be done on a trusted execution environment if that is appropriate for their application. So we are trying to explore and expand, if you want, the realm of applications that we can use these modern blockchains like SUI by adding a number of privacy features so that finally we can use them for most of the businesses. And our objective is very simple, and I want everyone to kind of know what the objective is. The objective is that down the line, in a year, in 5 years, when you are an application developer and you're thinking of building the new payment systems or the new Facebook or the new social networking application or the new video sharing or image sharing application, choosing a decentralized technology stack like the SUI ecosystem should be a natural choice. It should be the natural path to make it economically viable as an application and as a business, to make it easy to build as a technology stack, and to actually connect your application into a community that is ready and very positive to actually use whatever product you're building. This is our aim. And piece by piece by piece by piece, we're building towards basically fulfilling that aim. So thank you very much all for joining us today. I wish I was with you, and I'm very happy to take a couple of questions if folks are interested in that.
Thank you, George. Any questions from the από το κοινό? Κάποια ερώτηση, ναι. So, hi there. So one thing I'd like to note is, like, in the past, with chains that scale a lot, like SUI, we've seen a couple of examples under which, on certain chains, and one of them being like a very popular one, there was this attack under which some malicious actors were basically sending multiple transactions to nodes, like 100,000 transactions, in a way that the nodes are not able to handle them, and as a result, the chain stopped. So you guys are a pretty scalable chain, so I'm interested to hear how you mitigate that risk.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And first of all, I think that it's important to understand what do we mean when we say that a technology or a chain is scalable, right? And the way I want to explain this, maybe in less technical terms, is a little bit like McDonald's, right? So at any point, right, McDonald's has a number of shops around the world, and they can produce a number of burgers per day, right? And of course, if suddenly there is a spike in demand for McDonald's burgers, well, you know what I mean? It takes a certain amount of time to set up a new McDonald's shop and kitchen, etc. To some extent, you know, the demand for burgers may at any point outstrip the supply, because today there are that many particular McDonald's restaurants, right? But as we all know, right, the fact that there are a certain number of McDonald's restaurants today is not some kind of like cosmic limit, right? You could, if there is demand, build more, right? And then, you know, if the demand outstrips the supply of McDonald's burgers today, McDonald's will open more restaurant franchises. The basically availability of burgers will go up, and eventually everybody who wants a McDonald's burger will get a burger if the demand continues being high. It is the same for a scalable blockchain, right? At any particular point, you're very right. For example, SUI has a certain maximum number of transactions that it can do in a particular day. So if basically people send transactions to the network today that exceeds that capacity, the network will basically cap how many are received. And there are many ways to cap how many are received. There is a particular way which, you know, takes into account fees, which shared objects are touched. Like, you know, it's quite a complicated thing to try to process as much as you can. But at some point, you will have to shed load. And you're going to be like, sorry, guys, we've reached the capacity for what it is today, and we cannot shed load. And this is true for all systems. Now, what makes a system scalable is that it has the same property that, let's say, the McDonald's restaurants have. Namely, if the demand remains high, you can add more capacity in the form, in the case of a scalable blockchain, of more machines per validator or more validators, or there are many different ways to scale, and different ecosystems have gone different ways, right? In order to actually meet the demand with more supply of capacity. So yes, you're right, absolutely, that in the short term, any system has a limit of how much it can process. Scalable systems have the ability to add more resources to increase that limit over time. And, you know, SUI and, of course, other modern blockchain ecosystems have that property.
Anyone else has a question for George? No?
I have a question for George.
Okay.
George, this is Yanis. When are you coming to the SuiHub?
Very good question. So I would be delighted to be there in person in the end of June. So I hope to meet many of you there then.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, because we're going to have also the official launch sometime there in June. So we'd love to see you guys there as well. But yeah, thank you, George. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all, and I hope you have a great event.
Thank you.